Okay, greetings everybody. It's Armor of Truth Live number 282, and today we have with us James Roguski, who is, as far as we're concerned, an expert. As far as we're concerned, the expert on this issue of the World Health Organization, what is known as the Pandemic Treaty. James, welcome to the show again, and if you would, go ahead and tell us, just remind people a little bit about who you are and what you've been doing and why this matters so much to you, and then give us an update of where we are in this process.
Well, I'm going to step down off the pedestal that you gave me.
All right.
Thank you for that. But no, in all seriousness, to put this to everyone in the viewing audience, 2 years ago, I had no idea. Okay. And so, I discovered some information in February, March of 2022, and I fell down into the World Health Organization information rabbit hole, and still trying to find my way out. If I could coin a phrase, I want to get out of the WHO and on with the new. That's really what I want to be doing. But the WHO keeps pumping out all kinds of crazy information, and so I've been reporting on it. And they talk generally in English, but it's their own version of English, and so it kind of requires translation. And,
like terms of art, right? They've created their own language, or they've appropriated definitions and sort of terms of art, legalese, or something like that.
So they're very skilled, and I mean, all of these bureaucrats, it's part of the skill set, is to say something that sounds wonderful, but can be interpreted and implemented in a very different fashion. Okay, this is from the United Nations. Of course we want sustainable development. That sounds lovely. Okay, but how does that get interpreted and implemented? Well, you can twist that all kinds of different ways. The WHO currently is working on their 14th General Program of Work, GPW, right? And so they, throw all these acronyms in there. You don't know what the heck they're saying. And, they're basically going to spend a couple of $1 million this year begging to try to get a couple of $1 billion because they essentially run on donor money. Only about 16% of their budget is actually dues from the nations who are supposed to be in control of the WHO. But 84+% of their budget comes from nations that donate extra money, like the United States gave them an extra $750 million in 2022, over and above what we were obligated to pay. Many other nations, Europe and Germany and so forth, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And so 80+% of what they do is not for the general overall health of the world. It's whatever the heck their donors tell them to do with the money. Now, you're a media operation. If somebody came in and said, hey, I want to give you a couple of $1 billion, but I want you to do what I want you to do. Okay. I know you guys, and right. But you have to look at it, reality. If you're honest with yourself and somebody said, hey, I want to buy some of your time, effort, and influence, here's $1 billion, will you work with me? I don't know too many people who could actually go, well, wait a minute, what is it you want me to do? And it could certainly look wonderful, right? Like trying to stamp out polio, right? That's Bill and Melinda Gates's, that's their thing. But wait a minute, most of the polio that's around is actually the strain that's in the vaccine. So you go, what are you people really doing? Okay, so understanding that the World Health Organization is not what you think it is, it's very hard for people to unlearn or challenge assumptions. So the World Health Organization doesn't necessarily do things that are good for people's health. The international health regulations are really not about health at all. They really should be called the International Surveillance, Monitoring, Reporting, Emergency Declaring, Fear-Mongering Regulations. Then you'd have a clear understanding. And, the proposed agreement for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response is not really what most normal people would assume it to be based on the name. And so to really try to give people an introduction to what we're going to be talking about today, I got to go back 2 years at least. I mean, I could go back, decades, but if you could erase the blackboard of your mind, all of the things that you think that you've learned over the past 2-3 years about what happened with quote unquote COVID-19 and all the drugs and jabs that have been thrust upon the population. At the end of 2021, a little more than 2 years ago, the nations requested a special session of the World Health Assembly. They normally only meet once a year at the end of May, but they called for a special session, and the declaration that came out of that special session essentially said that they have a trade dispute that nations were unhappy about. And what happened was nations like Israel, the European Union, UK, Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and others, they were able basically to print money and spend billions, if not trillions of dollars to buy up all the jabs and remdesivir and everything else. And so the poor nations, who sadly believed that those drugs and jabs were health improving, they were upset that the wealthier nations were hoarding all of that. And so they wanted to negotiate through the WHO what they call an agreement for equitable access to pandemic-related products. Now, if it was food and water that the nations had cornered the market on, and the smaller nations were, dehydrated and starving, you would understand that, hey, wait a minute, don't be hoarding all of the things that people need. But this is about drugs and jabs, pandemic-related products. And so these negotiations started not to discuss whether or not those things actually improve anybody's health, or to have an after-event review of what did we do wrong and what could we do better and how should we do this the next time. No. This is a trade dispute that really should be in the World Trade Organization, if anywhere. But you have to understand that it's predicated on a certain set of assumptions where the poor nations are arguing for more drugs and jabs. They want more access to that. They can't afford really pharmaceutical company prices. They can't pay full price for this stuff. It's crazy. But they want the intellectual property and the manufacturing know-how and investment from wealthy donors to build out what I call the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex in the relatively poor nations. So, teleport yourself to the poorest area of the world. Do you really think that it's the optimal use of your money to be building genomic sequencing labs and testing labs to go out into the countryside, turning out over rocks and going through guano and bat caves and chicken coops and pigsties and wherever you may go, being all concerned about infectious diseases from animals when, the fundamental infrastructure needs improving, good water, good sanitation, good food, fewer pesticides and toxins and so forth and so on. The WHO's budget on a yearly basis is about $4 billion a year. They want $31 billion a year for pandemic products, pandemic preparedness, response, and prevention. And so many people have talked about this, but the core problem is this is just a misallocation of funds and attention and investment and everything else. They are not questioning any of the mistakes that were made, and quite frankly, any of the crimes and the horrors from the last 4 years, they basically failed to convince relatively poor people around the world to take the jabs because they couldn't afford them, they couldn't get the contracts, and by the time they started to become available, people had already wised up. And so they already got pretty much 3/4 of the developed world to fall for their story, but they missed the relatively poor areas on Earth. And that's what these negotiations are really about. And if you lose sight of the fact that this is a trade dispute, and the first suggestion that was really made to settle this, for the next time, which, is what they're hoping will come because there'll be a lot more money to be made. In the amendments to the international health regulations, two groups, the nation of Bangladesh and a group of nations in Africa, the African region of the WHO doesn't include all of Africa, but it includes 47 nations in Africa. They both submitted very similar proposals, and it would be a new Article 13A. Now, they know that Tedros, the Director General, can pretty much declare a public health emergency of international concern, or FAKE, anytime he wants without really having to justify it. The only thing that holds him back from doing it whenever he wants is if you cry wolf one too many times, people just stop listening to you. And so he can declare a public health emergency of international concern. And once that would happen, they would have him be given the authority to decide what is needed. Then he would set up an allocation mechanism whereby he would, according to their proposal, be given the authority to tell nation A, well, you have to manufacture what he tells you and give it to nation B. Now, if you think about that in a perfect world, yeah, okay, fine. If you called me up and you said, hey, I know you've got a PDF that I was looking for and I really need it. Could you send it to me? Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. Be happy to share, right? If your neighbor said, hey, can I borrow a tool, your grass cutter or something, I want to cut my lawn. Yeah, no problem, right? But when you have Tedros be in charge of telling one nation to give something to another nation, you might imagine that those negotiations are going a little sideways. And if anything, that is almost classic totalitarian, dictatorial, Marxist, communist, control the means of production, centralized command and control to a T. And so that is the proposal that is in the amendments. And it's been sitting there for a year being negotiated. We don't really know if it's still hanging around, if it's been changed or whatever. But what we do know is a different proposal, very different proposal, was made in the other agreement that they're negotiating. They want to start a new international agreement. And the idea in that one is based on something that I'm aware of because I've worked in the natural health world. And in 1992, they passed something in the UN that was adopted, the Convention for Biological Diversity. And the idea with that is pharmaceutical companies are a little bit notorious for raiding native culture knowledge about herbs, for healthcare, and finding some chemical compound in a plant, changing it just a little bit so that they can patent it and then make a ton of money. And so the Convention for Biological Diversity says, no, wait a minute. If you get access to that information, you have to share some of the benefits, share some of the money. And so when Omicron popped up in South Africa and Botswana, those officials immediately, as soon as possible, shared all that information with the world. And what happened was companies like Moderna and Pfizer turned that into the boosters, which turned that into a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And what South Africa got in return for doing what they were supposed to do was travel restrictions and, harm to their economy. And I think that is what set the stage for, this problem with these negotiations, because the solution that they've offered in this other agreement, they call the Pathogen Access and Benefit Sharing System. This really happened in a big way in Indonesia a little more than a decade ago. They found a new strain of influenza, and they didn't really want to share it because they know, hey, we're not getting anything out of this. Nations have come to view genetic or genomic information about pathogens as a national treasure, as something that's actually valuable. And they don't want to share it unless they're going to be promised to get something in return. Well, the language that's in that document it says very powerfully, nations must search the countryside and, your septic system or your chicken coop or your hospital or your bat cave or wherever, and report on any pathogens of pandemic or with pandemic potential. But the language for what is given in return is real kind of, wishy-washy. Yeah, we'll try to give you as much as we can, and we'll try to do this and try to do that. And it essentially says, well, they'll give 20% of whatever is manufactured based on what they've received. They'll give that to the WHO. And the nations are going, 20%, we make up 80% of the world. That's not enough. So that's kind of a mutated free market, horse trading kind of thing. We got some pathogen information. You guys have the manufacturing capacity. They're arguing over intellectual property and manufacturing know-how and investment. They all want to make their own drugs and jabs in their own country, but they don't have access to the wisdom and information and patents to do that. And the wealthy nations, corporations, don't want to give it up. They want to continue to make the profits, but they don't want to give up the information that would enable the other nations to do so. And what they're saying is, well, hey, this is life and death. The whole thing is predicated on a lie. The statistics on the WHO website for North and South America combined, which has roughly the same population as Africa, 16 times as many people in North and South America died and had their deaths attributed to COVID when compared to Africa. So hold on. We're going to export the type of system that killed 16 times more people into Africa. It should be the other way around. But the other way around isn't profitable. If we did what they did, you could argue that there would have been far fewer deaths, but all that money would not have changed hands. And so the insanity of these nations demanding equitable access to more poison and more biological injectable weapons, it's just absolutely insane, in my opinion. And so, needless to say, I'm happy that they're having difficulty. And so, with the proposed new pandemic agreement, most people call it a treaty, the nations are so unhappy, they told the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body back in December, go back to the drawing board and do a rewrite. And their next meeting is at the end of February. They're going to have a couple of marathon sessions later this year. So I'll put that a little bit on the back burner because it's in a complete and total state of flux. They've had many versions, but they're currently doing a rewrite. And we'll see that maybe in February sometime. The more interesting one is with the amendments. Back in October, they had a meeting. And rather than spoil the fun, I'll let you play the video. On October 2nd, they gave a report as to the status of the negotiations in regards to the amendments to the international health regulations. So if you have that video ready, let's go there.
All right, here we go.
Dear colleagues, we have been operating with the understanding that the package of the proposed amendments resulting from the work of this group would be finalized by January 2024 to meet the 4-month deadline stated in Article 55. However, we believe that we all share the same sentiment that realistically, the whole package of amendments will probably not be ready by January 2024.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to ask the Secretariat whether procedurally we could continue working until the 76th World Health Assembly in May 2024. I'd like to ask the Secretariat to provide some guidance in this matter.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The Health Assembly, in decision WHA 75-9, requested the working group, and I quote, to establish a program of work consistent with decision EB 153 and taking into consideration the report of the IHR Review Committee to propose a package of targeted amendments for consideration by the 77th World Health Assembly in accordance with Article 55 of the International Health Regulations, close quote. Article 55 of the IHR, which is referred to in Decision 75-9, sets out 2 procedural requirements relating to proposed amendments. The first one is that, quote, proposals for amendments shall be submitted to the Health Assembly for its consideration, close quote. The second one is that, open quote, the text of any such proposed amendment shall be communicated to all states parties by the Director General at least 4 months before the Health Assembly at which it is proposed for consideration, close quote. Again, that's the text of the relevant article of the IHR, Article 55.
We talked about the second excerpt, but let's play the third also.
Okay,
Is that Article 50.
I'm sorry. Okay, so jump to the...
No, play the second one and
keep
play
going.
the third.
Okay, just keep going. All right.
55, in its basic purpose, is intended to support the principle of fair and due notice. And fair notice means that notice is timely and complete.
Okay, do you want to go on into 3?
Yep.
All right.
A note on this deadline of the 77th World Health Assembly. If the deadline is not met, the WGHR would be expected to report to the Health Assembly in May 2024 that agreement could not be reached on the proposed amendments. This deadline cannot be changed as it was set out in decision WHA 75-9.
And maybe let's even do the fourth one.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that explanation. So the deadline is a deadline. There are no intentions to delay any deadlines. However, what we are looking as a group is how to procedurally proceed from now until the deadline, and that's what Steve has explained.
Okay, that's good. They're asking how to procedurally proceed. And the deadline is the deadline, and it cannot be, ignored. They know the rules. Okay. Had they truly been honorable, they would have put out a press release and said,
right.
Hey, we got 196 nations. They submitted 197 pages of proposed amendments, over 300. We've had about a year, and we're just not able to get everybody on the same page. We'll give you a report in May, progress report, but we're going to have to come back in 2025 because we're going to miss our deadline. Now, the point of raising this is you're not going to hear that on the nightly news. You're not going to read that in the New York Times. they did not put out such a press release. What they did, and we won't bore people with it, but on an article that I wrote back in October, they spent an hour conspiring, trying to figure out how to get around the rule. And so they've scheduled meetings for February. They've scheduled meetings for April. And if people are not paying attention, if you let them do this, in darkness, I forget which newspaper it is, democracy dies in darkness. They would continue to just negotiate right up to the last minute. And, Nancy Pelosi has said when she was speaker back when Obamacare was going through, I believe it was, here's this large 1,000-page bill being ready to be voted on. And people were saying, hey, we need time to read it. And her response was relatively infamous. Oh, don't bother. Just vote for it. You can read it after it passes.
Then we can see. Once it's law, then we'll know what it is. Yeah.
Okay. And so, unfortunately, in Congress, they get away with that because they don't have a rule against it. But as you can see in the WHO, they clearly have Article 55. There's really no wiggle room in there. It says, yeah, you can submit amendments, but if you do so, you got to submit them 4 months in advance. And that gives everyone an opportunity to consider it.
Now, this is where you've been pointing out, this is really where this is the crux of the matter here. Because recently, I think you put out a video that Iran had rejected some of the amendments from in July. But as you said in your article, that's kind of a moot point because they sort of ignored this particular amendment.
Yeah, I'll certainly go into that because we have a very good example. Okay, I got started in this 2 years ago. And what happened originally was after I mentioned earlier, they had met at the end of 2021 in a special session, and they wanted to have these negotiations begin. That was December 1st, 2021. About a month and a half after that, the Biden administration submitted a package of amendments to 13 articles, and they did that properly. It was on January 18th. It was signed, and had a seal from the U.S. government, official presentation, circulated to all of the member nations, a proposal for amending the international health regulations. Well, by the time they got to May, when they have their meeting, the nations had had time to look at it, and they kicked it to the curb. They, even before the meeting started, the assembly started, the rumblings were, oh, no, that's not going to happen, right? And so that time period, to be aware of what you're going to be asked to vote on, because you have to realize the list of things that they talk about is enormous. I mean, the paperwork that they put out in advance of the assembly, it's almost insurmountable. That's why the U.S. has like 64 members in the delegation, okay? They've got several dozen, maybe even hundreds of things that they're going to be voting on. And so they need time to prepare. You can't just, boom, drop that in and say, vote on it. I mean, you can in Congress, but you're not supposed to do that at the World Health Assembly. And so what they did in 2022 is, it's almost unbelievable, but since all the evidence is right in front of everybody's face, it is believable. The original submission was kicked to the curb, never even discussed. The United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, a handful of other nations broke their own rules. They crafted a new package of amendments, submitted it in the middle of the assembly on May 24th. They had secret backdoor meetings to, haggle away whatever. And on May 28th, they published a document, this is back in 2022, that said, oh, well, here's the amendments that we're adopting. And they said that they did so during the 8th plenary session. That's their 8th meeting. Only problem is that's on video, and they never talked about it. They never had a vote. They just said they did. And so if you don't notice, right, and nobody says anything, if you cheat, it's kind of like if you're playing chess and somebody moves a piece and you don't notice.
It's like in the law, like a fraud only occurs when it's found out, right? Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so 18 months after that, because there's an 18-month period for nations to consider this and reject it, a dozen members of the European Parliament wrote a letter to the WHO Director General Tedros, and they said, well, we're being asked, looking into these amendments, and we can't find any evidence that they were ever actually voted on. What's up? And they said, please provide us with evidence of a vote, and if not, then these are null and void. And so I trust the members of the WHO, the people involved there, about as far as I could throw them. Mm-hmm. And that's not very far at all. And they have stated very clearly that they think that rule can just be broken. Yeah, whatever. We're just going to keep negotiating because they want to push this thing through in May. And all I'm really asking people to do, it's kind of funny. I have to learn how to properly pronounce the word Schadenfreude. It's a German concept of when someone else is having a difficult time, it makes you feel a little better about yourself because you're not having that trouble. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And so, their troubles are fine by me because I don't want them to do what they're doing. And so all I'm asking people to do is pay attention, shine light on this. Take this video and share the daylights out of it so people understand what's going on. Because if you don't watch them, it's kind of like if you've got a cookie jar and the parents are out of the kitchen, they're somewhere else, and you can sneak a cookie here and there and nobody necessarily notices, unless you take the last one and then they're all on top of you. So, they're trying to swipe, our rights and freedoms and a lot of money. We just have to pay attention. And generally, criminals will do things in broad daylight, if they're that bold. But if we allow them to do it in secret and don't say anything, then part of the responsibility lies in us. We got to call them out and say, look, you guys have rules. You're not following your own rules for your own procedures. What's up with that?
Yeah, who's going to call them on it, right? The reason that they do this and the reason that they feel like they can continue to do whatever they want is because there's who's higher than them, and certainly their actions would indicate that they would like to see themselves as the supreme authority in the world. This is really about, as you're discussing here and explaining, this sounds like to me it's really about accountability and transparency and self-reliance. Now, these are the principles of the American way, and our traditional system of government has been through our consent, where they govern for us, not over us. But it seems like that this idea of it's now we're talking about self-governance versus top-down governance, and public-private partnerships making policies instead of legislators making laws, or legislators legislating to the will of the people. Mm-hmm. And so we also found something that we've talked before, and you said this is really like a venture capital, maybe the largest venture capital campaign in the history of the world. And we found a video, we've shared it here before, where it's on the channel called the Pandemic Action Network, and it's titled "The Final Countdown to WHA 75," and this is from a year ago. This is from June 23 of 2022, and what you have here is Jane Ellison, who was the WHO Deputy Director General, was speaking to a couple other folks there, and what she really just described was, I'll read from the transcript. They were talking about what you had mentioned, this venture capital idea about the investment, the possibility for return on investment. She said, but the really good news in the top line is that the figure that's emerged from that rigorous study she had described, that they had farmed out to at least 3 different agencies to tell us how could we make money on this. And she said, for every dollar invested in WHO, in the World Health Organization, member states can see a 35-to-1 return. And that's quite conservative, she says. She went on to say that it's more like you see 50-to-1. So here's some evidence to support the idea that this looks like a money-making scheme, maybe one of the largest ones ever, and at the same time, it's also a move for global governance. So, what do you, just quickly? I don't want to get us too far off track, but what do you think?
No,
about
that's
comment?
right. That's spot on. That's exactly the darn point.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, comment on that a little bit.
At the beginning of what you were saying there, I thought you were trying to lure me into an Abbott and Costello routine. Who oversees the who?
Right.
And, the Abbott and Costello routine, is that a question or is that a statement? Okay. Because the World Health Assembly is supposed to be the governing body of the World Health Organization.
Okay.
It's kind of like if Congress was in charge of the executive branch of government, right? And so, man, you got the fox watching the hen house here, and there's billions of dollars, to be played with. And so currently what's going on as we speak, they are, how Soviet Russia and Chinese Communist Party, they do a lot of central planning. They have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan or whatever it might be. Well, the WHO is working on their 4-year plan. They call it the 14th General Program of Work for 2025 and to 2028. And they're currently gearing up for what they call replenishment. And they're planning on spending between $3 and $5 million to have some fundraising events during the fourth quarter of 2024. So they're going to spend millions of dollars because they want to raise billions of dollars, because the way they're financed or funded is only about 16% of their budget comes from dues or assessed payments from the countries that are members. Going back 20 years, they started shifting to a different way of getting money. And nations give additional funding, like the United States gave over and above what they were obligated to pay, $750 million in 2022. They're the largest donor. And, several million dollars are donated by nations and organizations, foundations like Bill and Melinda Gates and Gavi and so forth.
Right, yeah.
And so that money is not guaranteed. And they have to wine and dine leaders, heads of state and chairman of the board of all these foundations. So they're putting together their package of what their plan is for the next 4 years, starting in 2025. And you go through the whole 46-page document, you get towards the appendix at the end. They're basically right in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. They're basically going to be doing the things that the United Nations has been pushing, Agenda 2030, basically. And so they need money. And so they're currently going through a round where they're asking for people's input, but not people, right? If you're on the list, they have a long list with these negotiations. There's about 400 organizations that get a seat at the table for some of these meetings. And what they're doing with this latest round for fundraising, the last sentence on their page says, well, all of these groups are welcome to contribute their public comments, but not individual people. I mean, it literally says individual comments not welcome. And you just go, this is an organization of organizations designed to take care of the organizations, not people. They don't want to hear about people. They don't want to hear what you have to say. Back in April of 2022, they had a public comment period about the treaty before it even existed. And they gave us about 6 days to give public comment from when they announced it to when the period was closing. And we got 33,884 comments around the world. And 99.9% of them were like, we don't want no stinking treaty.
Remember that. Yeah.
In September of 2022, they had a very convoluted thing that they were doing where you could hold your passport up to the camera and identify yourself, and then record a 90-second video. And we got several hundred people to do that. And the general sentiment, you can watch many of those videos, they're on screwthewho.com.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the vast majority of people said, we don't want this, but that doesn't matter. You know, they listen to their donors. And that's the problem.
No question about it. Yeah, that's again, top down. There's a shift. It seems that they would like to see an overall shift. We've kind of seen this in our own federal government here in the United States, to this shift of an idea away from the traditional form of government to this stakeholder capitalism, and where they're going to decide what's best for you because they must determine what's best for the community. Rosa Koire called it communitarianism, and I think that's probably a good term for it. It's sort of like this mixture between fascism and communism, but it's really corporatism. Summer, is there anything that you had from so far, that questions or anything from the chat that's come up that you wanted to throw in or ask right here?
No, I'm just loving all this information coming together. And yeah, because we had learned about that 35-to-1 return on investment.
That was kind of like this gem. Summer found that, so give credit to you for that one, because it's just sitting out there. There are only like 60 views on the video, and it's just out there. It's kind of like, the work you're doing. There's just we just got to get people to pay attention.
It's incredible how nobody's really paying attention to this.
Yeah.
It's like the single most influential thing over our lives, potentially upcoming, and yet people just aren't paying attention to it.
Well, I do believe that many people are around the world.
Yeah.
It all depends on who you talk to, I suppose. But here's what it really comes down to. And the WHO, I've often called the World Hypnosis Organization, because
they're good at that.
Look through the past 4 years, okay? They did not have any lawful authority to tell anybody that they had to do anything. But what happens, that game of telephone, you tell somebody and they tell somebody, I can't tell you how many times I've given some information to someone in the news media, and instantly it gets transmuted into something other than what the information started out as. Not necessarily with ill intent. That's kind of sort of just human nature. People tell a story, the other person hears it a little bit differently, they get it a little bit wrong, they embellish it when they tell it, and it flies right off the rails in no time at all. And so when the WHO says, oh, well, here's what we recommend, the media picks it up and says, oh, this is what you have to say. You try to put something on social media and they go, oh, no, you got to listen to the WHO. Well, that's not a law. That's not an authority. That's just their opinion. And we could get a group of people together and publish an opinion, and it has the same legal weight. But what happens is people come to assume that others have authority over you. And that's really what the problem is. Because as that cascades down, someone in a international organization puts out some document. And so someone in a federal bureau somewhere regurgitates it. And then someone at the state level regurgitates it. Someone at the county level regurgitates it down at the city, and then your school board and whomever, and you chase it all back up, and it's not what the last person presented it to be. And so I have a story from a couple of years ago when all the lockdowns and craziness were happening. We tried to order something and have it delivered, but it wouldn't come to the house. We had to go to a pickup location to get the package, and we got an email, and my girlfriend pointed it out to me because she knew it would get me. It said, oh, well, when you come to pick it up, please be sure to social distance and wear your mask. And it was guidance from the WHO, right? So guidance from the WHO found its way into my tracking email, for me to drive maybe a mile to go pick up a package. And I'm like, well, I appreciate your opinion, but you can just forget it. I don't need to listen to the WHO. They have no authority over me. But most people go, ooh, I've got to do what I'm told.
It's printed right there on that placard.
It says the World Health Organization. Well,
that's serious.
I've come across various scams in my life where somebody designs a seal, right? They have a logo. They pick a name like I don't know, the Federal Reserve, and people think it's an official government institution.
Right.
And they know that a certain percentage of the people are going to fall for the story. So the WHO is a very good storyteller. And what is going on with these negotiations is, an order of magnitude increase in the power of a story, right? They want money to build out the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex so they can go look for pathogens with pandemic potential so that they can fearmonger people into getting another jab or taking another drug at the potential that, well, that boogeyman might get you. And so, you can, if you're skilled at lying and manipulating people, you can scare people into doing things that really don't make any sense. Money transfers hands, and power and control is transferred based on propaganda and a story. And then you get, peer pressure from the people who are falling for the scam. And they missed out on the vast majority of the relatively poor nations over the last 4 years. Arguably, you can argue with these numbers, but maybe 75% of people in the developed nations fell for the story because maybe we've got more media. And only maybe about 25% of, the poorest nations. Someone told me, I don't know if this is true, but, the uptake of the injectables in Haiti was, very, 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 very low. And, they're not suffering from the health problems that, wealthy nations like in Europe and the US are. And so the bizarre aspect of what's going on is the nations that are arguing for equitable access to pandemic-related products, ventilators, midazolam, remdesivir, molnupiravir, Paxlovid, and all of the many jabs, they should be on their knees thanking God that, they did not gain access to those things, and they're relatively doing okay. But the profit motive of being able to gain access to the intellectual property to manufacture that and hoist it upon your own people, this whole entire set of negotiations is predicated on, quite frankly, a lie, but at the very least, a false set of assumptions. Why would they want more of that? And it's because they've locked themselves into a position and they're not able to say, now, well, wait a minute, those drugs are poisonous and those jabs did not stop the things they were supposed to stop. And what are we doing? Okay. And I just, once people look at what's happening, you realize that this is really just a big venture capital prospectus. They want to get tens of billions of dollars of public money and foundations and donors and whatever, and funnel it into an industry where they can profiteer off of the fear of the next pandemic. And there's nothing really to be afraid of. Put on your armor of truth and, understand what's going on. The truth will set you free. And all I've been trying to do is, shed some light on what it is they're doing. And they are failing. They're failing to reach agreement on the treaty. They're failing to reach agreement, and they have a deadline of January 27th for the amendments. So spread the word, take this video and share it with everybody you possibly can. Get as informed as you can. I always give everybody my phone number. And so if you have any questions, give me a phone call at 310-619-3055. All of the information is on jamesroguski.substack.com. And this is actually good news. But in many ways, it seems like people have been vaccinated against accepting good news.
Well, what you're describing,
really
it seems to me, it sort of, this is something that we deal with quite a lot here. I enjoy dealing with is they're really just creating a new meta narrative for the world when it comes to what is disease, how does it happen, and this whole idea of people of the nations searching in, like you said at the top, whenever you find new whatever substances, pathogens, viruses, whatever it is, and you have to report all of this. And this has to do, I guess, because everything needs to be patented, because as you said, this seems to be a venture capital scheme. But but how do you get people to go along with it is really, that's been the confusing part, as someone was saying earlier. Why are people not seeing it? It's because, as you've stated here, they've created a new meta-narrative for the world regarding sickness and health and safety, right? What is safety? They've redefined these terms, and we need to learn to ask more questions and learn how to engage with this. And so why don't you help us understand what people can do, and I'll try to get some visuals up to go along with you from your Substack, so that
first and foremost, realize that January 27th is their deadline.
Okay.
There's nothing really for us to do except spread the word, bring up people's awareness about this, and keep an eye out for what, if anything, the WHO presents, because they've been negotiating these amendments very much in secret. They're supposed to present a final package, in their words, package of targeted amendments in alignment with Article 55. Well, if they somehow magically manage to do that, which they've told us they're not going to, but if they do, then we will have something tangible to discuss. But I think what they're likely to do is to just try to keep this as quiet as possible, and I'm trying to make it as noisy as possible. So if nobody pays any attention and they just miss that deadline and keep negotiating and think that they're going to submit something at the last minute and ram it through, we have to call them out for the liars that they are.
And the two meetings that you had spoken about are February and April, is that correct?
February 5th to the 9th and April 22nd to the 26th for this set of negotiations. There's another set of negotiations for the treaty, but we'll talk about that when they give us the next version, which is in a state of flux. So you can't even talk about it because you don't know what the heck it is. And that's the problem. Now, I will cut them a little slack. They've gone a year in secret, and we've sent FOIA requests and so forth, and we know that there are interim versions that have been discussed in secret. Okay, fine, private negotiations, you want them to be where people feel like they can say what they want to say, but the secrecy must end on January 27th. And if it doesn't, then they don't get to make any changes in May. I'll be right here waiting for you in 2025. They can come back and try again. But, their rules, they clearly understand that they have a deadline. And, how do they procedurally proceed from here? How about being honorable and truthful and transparent and just say, hey, we failed. They failed to meet their deadline. They'll give a progress report. You heard what he said. Got to give a progress report, and we'll see you in 2025.
I guess they're I guess aware, or what? I guess they know that if they were fully transparent, they probably wouldn't get a lot of support from the people on this. I'm right now at stoptheglobalagenda.com, which is one of your many websites. I usually when I can't remember, I usually use exitthewho.com to get into your to your realm.
So exitthewho.com is a piece of legislation in the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives, to do exactly that. Exit the Who. It's only like a page long, right? And it's just stop giving them money, tell them we're leaving, and repeal the legislation that got us in the first place. I think there's about 53 co-sponsors for that. Stop the Global Agenda is in support of a different piece of legislation.
Okay.
Tandem, two companion legislation, one in the House and one in the Senate, and that's to exit the WHO and the United Nations. So, take your pick or support them both. Go there. And, the running joke around here, my girlfriend's sitting right here, so, it's an ongoing joke. I have learned that nagging works.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Call your congressperson, tell them what you want. Call them again, call them again, call them again. And the point is, it's our job to instruct our public servants how we want them to act. Mm-hmm. And if we're not doing our job, we've got to look in the mirror and say, oh, my bad, right? Keep nagging them, get more people to nag them, tell more people. Nagging works, not immediately, not the first time. That's what nagging is. It's ongoing. And so don't let up, point out all this information to them. And, if you agree that the path forward should be exiting the WHO or exiting both the WHO and the UN, spread the word to as many people as you can. Find allies, wherever you live and around the world. And you'll be surprised what people can accomplish when they're focused on what it is that they actually want. And they stand up. And we're supposed to be, the last line of the Star Spangled Banner, we're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. And if we can't find enough courage to stand up to our representatives, then we're going to lose our freedoms. Mm-hmm. And so stand up and call your public servant and tell them what it is you want. And, there are elections coming up. And so if they're on the wrong side of an issue that you feel passionate about, and I know election, I won't even say the word, it'll kick off all kinds of, algorithms. The WHO has figured out how to hold a vote without holding a vote. They just say they did.
Yes, right? We've seen that. We have evidence of that.
Yeah, I have evidence. And so who is it that you want to keep this a secret from? So spread the word, share this video. Give me a phone call anytime if you have a question, 310-619-3055. Everything's on jamesroguski.substack.com. And spread the good news.
We sure will.
So that's stoptheglobalagenda.com, and let's just stick with that one for now. On there, you'll find ways to contact the relevant leadership in your area. You'll find cut and paste. James made it very easy, where if you has listed there for you who your representatives are, and you can cut and paste the text and just fire it off to them. You can fire off 100 to them. Just inundate their inboxes.
If you're on there, scroll down until you hit the graphics. I've tried to make it easy. There's little business card size things that you can pass out, and little take one flyers that you can do. If you keep scrolling down the page, you should run right into it. Trying to make this as easy as possible for people to take part.
And that was that. You're saying the little small ones are on stoptheglobalagenda.com?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're on stoptheglobalagenda.com, there's some images that you can download and print out and either digitally share them, or in the physical world, hand somebody something that's
start handing them out.
Essentially a little business card type flyer. Spread the word.
As you can see here on stoptheglobalagenda.com, James has, text of the email that you can send. Copy it, paste it. You can find your representatives here, and it's all there for us.
If you go way down the page, you'll hit the graphics, and if you're creative, make your own. But if you keep it a secret, then you're just as bad as any other censor in the world.
That's right.
Spread the word.
There's censorship or apathy. I guess is just as bad. It's just as bad for us. the whole idea around the American experiment was self-governance, and that means we have to be engaged. We have to know what's going on around us, and there's certainly an entity outside of our nation and also within our nation that want to change fundamentally the way we live and turn it into this top-down governance system. But there's something we can do, and it's required of us. Freedom requires some kind of action. Well, James, we really do appreciate all the hard work you've done. Summer, please, you've got anything from the chat or any questions?
No questions. We have several of your links listed under the video, so guys, you can check that out. Ways to get in touch with James, follow his YouTube channel, follow his Substack, and we're just really grateful that you're doing what you're doing, and thank you for spending time with us today.
It's a pleasure. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year
Thank
to
you.
you.
Happy New Year to you too. All
God
right,
bless.
So thank you. We'll be in touch, and we'll do this again very soon.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, so we'll just summarize here and wrap up. What I wanted to do was share a little bit. How about you? You want to, since it's just us here now, did you want to, anything you wanted to say just in summary there? What do you want to say to everyone? I mean, what's on your heart right now about what we've just talked about? I just want to say my wife is passionate about this. She cares so much about this topic, a lot of other topics, but specifically this one, and she's educated on it, and she's brought forth like all of the information, James Roguski and all this is all her. This is all her research. She's found all this. I would have never probably encountered James, or I probably wouldn't. I'm sort of in my lane. I'm trying to think in theology and scripture, but this is so important that we apply theology and scripture to what's happening in the world today. So I just wanted to mention
Thank
that
you.
and say that this is really.
We've done good teamwork on this.
Well, I appreciate your hard work on it, because otherwise I'm not sure we would be at this level in the conversation. So
Yeah,
go ahead,
well,
just
it
say
really
what's
is
on your heart.
It's a prayer answered. It's just something that is so very important for the time that we're living in right now. And it's sort of waiting in the shadows, if you will. Like, it's just like what James said. If we don't call out what they're doing every step of the way and make it known that we're like, hey, we see you, then what are we doing? We need to be involved. We need to speak the truth in love. Christ would have us do that, bring evil to the light. So I'm just very grateful to be a part of this conversation. And yeah, that's all I want to say about it. I thought James did a great job today, and so did you. And just counting on all you guys out there who are listening to pray about it. And of course, God is in control. We know that, but we need to take an active role in this as well and get people educated in how they can get involved and make their opinions known about it.
And call James Roguski. If there's any questions, you're not sure about what to do, right there's his number. Area code 310-619-3055. He's I'm sure even in primetime hours he's available. Give him a call if you have any questions about what to do, about what's going on, about anything at all having to do with the it's got to do with the World Health Organization and this pandemic treaty and the loss of freedoms and all that. But also, if you have questions, about the health side of this, James is specifically gifted in that area too. So if you want to,
he has that background in natural health.
Yeah,
in that whole industry for a long time, very seasoned.
And he's given his private number there for everyone to call, and we ask that you respect that, and that any trolls out there just don't. But call him and ask him whatever it is that you want to know, because he is, like I said at the top, as far as we're concerned, this man is the expert on this issue. You haven't found anyone else that is as proficient at understanding the legal side of it, all of the new, like you just said, the meta-narrative. He's identified that it's really a venture capital scheme. And I just want to finish up with a couple comments here from a book that I want to recommend here. This is by Mary Baker, Citizen Ninja. This is how to stand up to power. She does an excellent job of defining the terms that we hear regularly. What is stakeholder? Right? What is stakeholder capitalism? What does all this stuff mean? This book is very good at just breaking that down into the basics. Let's see. I wanted to say here that what we have to focus on is this. This is the overall. This is the overarching issue, right? James has given you ways to contact your congressmen and senators. That's how you get involved locally. Get involved with those legislators, those elected officials that are over your area. Okay, and that's how we engage federally. But also, we have to be so aware of what's going on locally in your own local government, right in your own backyard, because ultimately that's where all of this is implemented. You heard James mention earlier where he had a delivery, and on the delivery there was a guidance there from the World Health Organization. Well, that came from the WHO, but it was a local official that allowed that to happen. Local government is vital to a free society. And this is the 10th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, reserves for the states and their people all powers not delegated to the federal government. That leaves us lots of power. The framers of the Constitution determined that the federal government should focus on specific limited obligations enumerated in Article 1, Section 8, that in summary include commerce regulation. So there you go. There's the pandemic. What's the term? Sustainable financing. It's sustainable financing. That's where that comes in. Commerce regulation, national defense, and jurisprudence. National defense, a lot of times when you hear that term, you think, oh, that's the military. That's what the federal government does. No, national defense starts with you defending your rights. That's national security at its most important level. You defending your rights. And jurisprudence, that just has to do with the legal system, what is legal, what is not legal, and how do we interpret that? We need to be aware. Let's see. Stand up for your civil rights. American civil society supports the individual within the paradigms of family, religious institutions, business, and the rule of law. All of these institutions within our nation have created prosperity, charity, and liberty. You hear it so often today online, especially in the truth movement, that there's almost an idolatry of liberty. Well, we shouldn't make it an idol, but liberty comes through submission. Now, hang on. I know what that sounds like. But liberty, true liberty, comes through submission to the will of God, because everyone's going to serve a master. You're not going to get out of that in this life. Everyone is serving a master.
Amen.
And so liberty in the sense that everyone thinks of it, only comes through submission to the will of God, not submission to the will of the WHO. And that is why you see this movement for them to assume absolute authority. They believe they are autonomous, but there is a power above them. They are accountable to the God of this universe. As long as our system of government is based on equal representation of self-governing individuals, we can stand. There's a disproportionate ratio of constituents today. This is where the problem comes. A disproportionate ratio of constituents to business and NPO, NGO associations who are speaking on your behalf today. This is what you saw, this working group here on the WIHR, the working group on the international health regulations that we saw at the top, the video we played. They're sitting around at that table deciding your fate. Let's see, where is it? Deciding what these people, they're sitting there deciding for you what should be good, what should be wrong. This is a shift in power away from self-government to something called governance. Governance. And the best way to understand that is just to sort of say that governance is sort of like what, when you go into Walmart, when you're inside their store, there's policies and rules there. They're not laws, right? They're not necessarily laws, but they're the policies everyone has to honor while you're in this space. That's kind of like what we're talking about with governance. So they don't have to pass laws to get you to do things. They just have to create these policies that, or guidance, right? That's what James said earlier. He was talking about these are guidances. They're just guidances. But stakeholders are individuals or groups that have an interest in public policy. By wielding their civic powers, citizen ninjas reclaim their rightful place at the stakeholder table. So we have to get used to the term stakeholder. It causes a cringe in me. I know you as well.
Certainly does in me.
Yes, because of the research we've done and where we see the term, how the term has been implemented and used. Calling you a stakeholder. No, we're citizens. We're citizens of this nation. First and foremost, we're citizens of the kingdom of God, and we're sojourners in this world as Christians, but we also hold that citizenship as American citizens. So we don't want to let them redefine us as stakeholders. Because stakeholders are people that have an interest in the policy but don't necessarily have a voice in how it's implemented. Citizens are self-ruled. As I said earlier, traditional systems of government are at the consent of the people or the governed. What we're seeing here is this being turned upside down to top-down governance. The strength of our traditional system of government lies in the foundation of self-governance, right? How we behave, how we act. Self-government is squashed and diminished by this system that the WHO is trying to implement. Distant federal agencies with increasing autonomy inject themselves into our lives and our local government by dispatching enforceable rules, right? Enforceable rules, not necessarily laws always, but enforceable rules and regulations written by nameless bureaucrats and administrators. And the problem is, in the United States, is that our federal agencies are also remote from us. We have a big nation, so it's hard for us to hold them accountable. And so we've seen over the years a drift away from accountability and transparency to sort of an occulted way of running the government. So let me just again encourage you to check out this book. Let's get up here full screen. By Mary Baker. There you go. Citizen Ninja, Stand Up to Power. I would also recommend, I don't have it in my hand right now, but Rosa Corey's Behind the Green Mask. You can still find that on Amazon. That is an excellent primer. As she was writing this book, none of this was happening. But her words in that book are almost prophetic. They're definitely prescient. And she in Northern California, she worked in real estate, in commercial real estate there, and in, I think it was specifically in zoning. So she saw this happening early, before anyone really. And the reason is because she was involved locally within the local government. So that's where you can see this being implemented. So Rosa Corey's Behind the Green Mask, Mary Baker's Citizen Ninja, just a couple. What we're going to, Rosa Corey's book is, we'll just refer to that as like a secular text. But Mary Baker, in the beginning of her book here, gives glory to God, and says that she felt called, moved at least, to provide this to her fellow American citizens with a specific message to Christian brothers and sisters. couple sources, resources for you to check out there. I think that's where we'll leave it for today. We appreciate you being with us. Summer, anything on the way out?
No.
All good. Okay. Folks, thank you for being with us again today. We look forward to seeing you here again very soon. We've been, just as a little teaser, we've been checking out some of the, we like to do our Friday Fringe shows. I'm not sure we'll get to do that this week, but if so, whenever we do it again, the aliens in Miami.
Yeah.
Right? Have you guys seen this?
The tall ones.
Yeah,
apparently.
Just quickly, I'll pull that. You search that on YouTube. Just search Miami aliens, and you're going to see something so ridiculous and silly that you can't believe it's true. I mean, you can't believe that people are actually falling for it. But check this out. I'll give you a little teaser here.
Okay, and now to our #1 trending story on CBSMiami.com.
It involves talk of alien sightings at Bayside Marketplace. On New Year's Day, there was a massive police response in downtown Miami. More than 50 young people armed with sticks began fighting. Police say juveniles were also setting off fireworks, causing chaos.
So now people are posting online saying that police weren't there to handle a group of rowdy teens, but rather 8 to 10 feet tall shadowy aliens. Conspiracy theories are saying a big creature could be seen standing in front of the entrance to the shopping area, Bayside. Today, the phrases Miami Mall and aliens of Miami have been among the top 10 searches on Twitter's trending tab.
There you go, folks. There's the evidence.
Evidence that the MSM is a tabloid magazine.
Yeah, how about that? They don't have time to cover the international health regulations and what's going on with the so-called pandemic treaty. But let's make sure we report on the aliens.
8 to 10 feet tall.
8 to 10 foot tall aliens, Nephilim. We've heard people say these are the Nephilim. They're back. Well, we've been gathering some info on this, and
Clown world. It's the clown world.
One of the things we like to do is point out things like this and just show, okay, as a Christian, how in the world, how do I think through this? What as this becomes more and more prevalent, we've got these hearings these congressional hearings and all that. How do we think through this? How do we respond to people when they ask us or say, well, I think aliens are here. I think they've invaded us. I think the government's hiding aliens from us and all that. How do we respond? We want to help you with that.
Advertising 101 teaches that repetition over time starts to build the narrative for people. They'll eventually become convinced, well, hey, it must be true. The news is constantly covering stories like this. Like, you see the story and you're like, maybe you see one or two and it doesn't really make an impact, and you're kind of looking at it going, this is really goofy. But then if it keeps happening over time, peppered here and there, that's advertising. That's how you're going to start bending the culture to where you want to steer them.
No doubt. It has to do, as we were talking in the show with James, it has to do with meta-narrative. This creates a new kind of meta-narrative, because before now, the general overarching meta-narrative in America anyway was that, well, aliens don't exist, but they've and like the government does all it can. If they do exist, the government's doing all they can to hide them. Well, now it's shifted now. Now they're not UFOs, they're UAPs, and now the government's not trying to hide it. They're trying to slowly disclose it to the world so that they can handle it. And it's a new paradigm.
Well, again, like funding SETI and all of that, and research for extraterrestrials. I mean, that's all about ultimately funding for surveillance of the skies. So that's my position on that.
Yeah.
They want to have total control over who travels in the air, not just who travels on the road, who travels in the airplane, but they want to have control over what aircraft is going up, what aircraft is coming down, what people are doing. It's the surveillance grid.
Well, as Dazed Digital says here, extraterrestrial activity is off to a strong start in 2024. 10-foot tall aliens spotted in Miami. Now they're on holiday in Brazil.
Or, fodder for, hey, this is crazy disinformation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's cut it. We've been going for a while.
They just keep it bouncing back and forth. Well, look forward to some of this coming soon. We want to help you think through this and give you a solid response. And apologetics, a Christian response to all of this. How do we respond to it? So once again, a big thanks to James Roguski. A personal thanks from myself to Summer for her hard work in this topipic. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to cover it at this level.
James, thank you, Brad.
All right, folks. We'll see you again here very soon. And until we see you again, God bless.
God bless.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.